Here's the reality. The economy is failing the American people. Donald Trump said he was going to lower prices. Prices are increasing.
But inflation's down
on
a lot of those core products.
There is a tremendous amount of waste and fraud. In fact, the Government Accountability Office says upwards of $500 billion.
We now have 2 sets of articles of impeachment against President Trump. He overcame those. Do you think members should be wasting time on that?
Look, well, some members may be focused on that. The majority of House Democrats and Senate Democrats are focused on standing up to the excesses and extremes of this administration, which is already failing the American people. That's where Democrats' focus is at right now, squarely on making sure that we stand up for hardworking Americans who are being left behind in this Trump economy, which is already failing 100 days in, right? Look, he promised...
Well, wait, let's just talk about some of this, because we talked about this with the panel a little bit. So wages are up. They've beaten 2 jobs reports expectations. Inflation is down. The market is pretty much settled back to where it was before the tariffs were announced. So this administration feels like they are putting people in a good position. Gas is down, groceries are down, those kinds of things.
Well, that's just wrong. I mean, the reality is most Americans and most economists believe we're headed toward a recession. And the reality
but you don't quibble with those numbers as they exist.
No, look, I mean, here's the reality. The economy is failing the American people. Donald Trump said he was going to lower prices. Prices are increasing.
But inflation's down on a lot of those
He said that he was going to actually have a booming economy. The economy that has shrunk, the GDP shrunk in the first quarter. We actually are seeing a very high likelihood that we're headed towards a recession. Now look, Donald Trump made a lot of promises to Americans last year, and this budget that he's bringing forward is actually going to increase prices for most hardworking Americans. The tariffs that he's put on for sure are going to increase prices for the hardworking Americans, that many of them who voted for him. So the reality is that's where we're focused on right now. This budget he's bringing forward, which is going to cut Medicaid, all to give a tax break to the richest people in this country and corporations, and not helping hardworking Americans again.
To be clear, and I know people have a lot of concerns, but he told Time Magazine he would actually veto anything that came before him that was a cut to Medicaid. So obviously we're all going to track that, because that's a promise made that he has made on numerous occasions. I want to talk about some of the inter-party turmoil you're having to referee as the new chair of the DNC. There's this disagreement that's been very public between sort of the old guard, James Carville, the new progressive voice, and David Hogg. People can have appreciation within the party for both of them, but that has been clear. There's an issue. As to reports that David Hogg is raising money to primary Democrat incumbents, Mr. Carville called it, and I will quote, "jackassery of the highest level." Have you talked to the 2 of them about ironing this out as you try to get a cohesive message moving forward?
I have talked to both of them, and let me just say this. You know, we're a big tent party, right? We have a lot of different voices for sure. And, you know, I like David Hogg a lot. I think he's an amazing young leader. But for me, you know, this has always been about making sure that no party boss ever puts its thumb on the scale. In our party primary process, we should stay out. Our job is to be the referee, to call the balls and strikes, to make sure that we actually have a fair and level playing field so all voices can participate, all people can feel like their candidates they support have an opportunity to compete. No party leader at any level should be putting its thumb on the scale, and it's really important to me. I campaigned on this as I was running for chair. I was the person who brought forward the superdelegate reform in 2017, as well as a neutrality pledge in 2017. It's part of who I am, and so this disagreement right now within the party, it's really not a disagreement. We're going to pass this neutrality pledge because it's a principle that's really important to me. Our party has to be completely neutral. Once the primary voters choose a nominee for us, whether it's presidential or otherwise, we're going to work like hell to support whoever that is, but it's not up to party leaders to choose that nominee.
Okay, I want to talk about this. Ashley Etienne, who used to run an anti-Trump sort of war room for Speaker Pelosi, says they were very effective, and she's worried that Democrats aren't kind of following their policies or some of the ways that the speaker got things done. She said this week that either you or Chuck Schumer or Hakeem Jeffries have to take the reins. She said, take the power and say, here is where we're going. She says you haven't done that. Is she wrong?
Well, let me just say this. I mean, there's lots of people with lots of different ideas out there. I'm not here to win the argument. I'm here to win elections. And that's what I'm fiercely focused on right now, is building the infrastructure to do that. Look, we've had 100 town halls in over 45 states just in the last 6 weeks alone because Republicans have refused to listen to their constituents, right? And if they're not going to do their jobs, we'll do it for them. I think the reason they don't want town halls is because of all the pain and the anguish that's being inflicted upon the American people. They don't want want people to see that. We're going to make damn well sure that Americans see what exactly is happening to thousands and hundreds of thousands of people's lives throughout this country. And so, no, we're fighting back. Our party, while we're very diverse, of course, our party is unified in making sure that we stand up and deliver on the promises that we've made to the American people. Now, look, I've said this multiple times. We can't just resist Donald Trump. Sure, we have to do that, but we also have to give people in this country a sense of who we are, what we're fighting for, and why, and that means we give them the alternative. We give them a sense of what we would do if we're put back in power, and we're doing both. We're resisting Donald Trump with every fiber of our being because of this existential moment we're in this country, and we're also standing up and giving them a sense of what we stand for.
I quickly want to ask you before we have to go, Kilmer Obrego Garcia, this has gotten a lot of attention. A number of your members have gone to El Salvador or have plans to go. And people that I talk to that are not hyper-partisan or hyper-political, they at home are having a hard time understanding why Democrats are fighting so hard to bring back somebody who was here illegally, has allegations of gang membership that were verified by a police department, then accepted by 2 judges, a woman, his wife, who's made numerous allegations of domestic violence against him, this police stop that shows potentially the suspicion that he was trafficking people. Do you worry that the party has expended so much political capital on that case? Now, we can talk about the legal, and we have, and I think that's important to debate. But the optics of Democrats so invested in that, a lot of folks I talk to cannot understand it.
Well, look, I think the question we need to ask is, are we a nation that values the rule of law and our Constitution and due process? Due process is a critical bedrock principle in this country.
So legal arguments aside, because those are important.
Well, they're
the
very
optics
important.
of this particular person.
Yeah, well, look what I would say. I don't know much about Mr. Garcia, but what I do know is that Donald Trump has been rounding up grad students and sending them, off. He's rounded up legal U.S. citizens, 2- and 3- and 4-year-old kids that he's shipping off to foreign countries.
But again, we have to speak factually about that. This was a situation in which the mother who was here illegally was allowed to decide what she wanted. She wanted to take the children with her. They weren't deported. They're U.S. citizens. They can come back.
Let me just say, we have to focus. One thing we probably agree on in both parties is we need a path to comprehensive immigration reform, and we need to have strong border security. Both parties agree on that. We need to come to the table in a meaningful way to address this. The way that Donald Trump has approached this has been so haphazard. And, no, I don't think the optics are bad. And standing up for our Constitution, the rule of law, and due process. Every person in this country deserves due process, and that's not what's happening under this administration.
Listen, if you can broker a deal on immigration, I think all of Washington would be very impressed. Out of control spending and the growing debt. The combination of that, you said just days ago, is the greatest threat to our country and our children's future. No responsible leader can witness this precipitous decline and defend the status quo. And that yet is what critics say you're doing. This reconciliation package extending the tax cuts from 2017, cuts to other places that are very important. So looking at that, are you convinced, though, that the president, the speaker, the other House chairs, including our next guest, Jason Smith, share that level of concern that you do about the out-of-control spending?
Well, Shannon, I think every Republican says that they share that concern. The question is, will we have the political courage to execute on that and right-size the bloated bureaucracy, as was reflected in the president's budget, and deal with this wartime level debt, $2 trillion in annual deficit spending that's going to double, and interest payments that exceed not only national defense, but Medicare payments. The wheels are coming off the wagon. We can't get to the president's rocket ship economy. We cannot usher in the golden age. In fact, we risk a sovereign debt crisis if we don't deal with the unsustainable deficits and national debt. So this is a pivotal moment for our country. It's a generational opportunity to get our fiscal house in order, and that has to be a part of. And in fact, the president has called for us to put our country on a path to balance. That is part of the full America First agenda, and it's reflected in the House budget resolution.
Okay, so let's talk about this reconciliation package, because there are a number of skeptics who think it only will explode debt and deficit. Are you convinced that what's been put together, you can tell the American people, is not going to contribute to the concerns that you have? Are there any daylights? Is there any difference between what you and Chairman Smith have come up with? Because there's still a lot of very difficult decisions to be made about this package, the details.
Yeah, I'm convinced that if we take the cost of tax cuts and defense and border spending, and we achieve and exceed our budget targets for offsetting those through revenue to the Treasury as a result of the pro-growth policies in the budget reconciliation bill, and the deficit spending reduction through entitlement reform mainly. That's health care, welfare, and other programs. If we do that, Shannon, we will bend the curve on debt to GDP and deficit to GDP. The Secretary of Treasury says we have to stabilize the debt and give confidence to the bond markets. And we have to go from 7% deficit GDP to 3.5%. So if we follow the framework that we laid out in the budget resolution, then we will restore fiscal health. It won't get us out of the debt hole overnight, but it is a good first step and a down payment for our kids to actually be on good fiscal footing, a sustainable path, and enjoy the same opportunities and freedoms that we have. So the House is going to drive it. If we achieve that framework and those budget targets, we will improve the fiscal health of our country, indeed. So
one of the things you talk, and I hear you saying if a lot, sounding as if you maybe are not convinced that this is all yet locked into stone, the place that you would like it to be, to see the math, as we say, when it comes to figuring these things out on Capitol Hill. But I want to ask you about Medicaid specifically, because the House Energy and Commerce Committee has been tasked with cutting $880 billion. Now, they oversee Medicaid, so that's where Democrats think the slashing is going to come. Here is the top Democrat in the House, Hakeem Jeffries.
They want to end Medicaid as we know it. They're going to hurt children, hurt families, hurt seniors, hurt people with disabilities, close hospitals, shut down nursing homes, and people will die.
Okay, almost no one thinks that you can slash $880 billion just through waste, fraud, and abuse. So what is your response to the Democrats' warning about the fact that Medicaid may come into play here?
Well, you asked me about the if the if conditional language I'm using, and the reason I'm doing that is because the question is, will Republicans surrender the opportunity to actually bend the curve on entitlement spending and enact entitlement reforms, because there is a tremendous amount of waste and fraud. In fact, the Government Accountability Office says upwards of $500 billion over the 10-year budget window just in Medicaid. You've got hundreds of billions siphoned out for other purposes than serving the Medicaid beneficiary. There is no work requirement for able-bodied adults like there is in every other means-tested welfare program. And in fact, Medicaid, because we give a higher federal match to able-bodied adult population, this is the Obamacare expansion population, we actually hurt access to the pregnant, blind, disabled, the most vulnerable, the poorest and sickest among our fellow Americans as a result of the structure of the program. We can save over $1.5 trillion without touching a dime of the benefit funding. So the question is, will we be susceptible to the fear-mongering and the false rhetoric that you just heard from the Democrat minority leader in the House? And this is the same tired play they run, and unfortunately, Republicans haven't collectively leaned in and just done the right thing. We will be rewarded because we're doing this for the sustainability of these programs for the most vulnerable, as well as being fiduciaries for tax dollars. And this moment will not happen in my political lifetime again. So we have to seize it, do the right thing, and go educate and sell what we did to the American people. And the benefits that accrue, I think, will come to fruition by the midterms, and it will go well for our party. Yeah,
they're going to want to see short-term and long-term payoff. And I know the devil's in the details. And like you said, getting out there and selling it once you have this lockdown is another part of the equation.